What's going on YouTube? Welcome in, I am LiboATM and welcome to another discussion video here on the channel. If you've not watched any of these before, it's basically where I talk about things going on in Dead by Daylight, either new updates or releases or just general things that are going on in the game today, and talk about whether it's good or bad for the game. So we're gonna flip up the format a little bit today. As you guys know, I like to jump in and around the DBD forums and see what people are saying and what's going on. And I found a series of very interesting threads about the most overrated and underrated perks in Dead by Daylight. So I thought I'd do a video on it, basically. So here we are. We're going to do the overrated perks. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you three what I would class as overrated perks for Survivor, three perks I would class as overrated for Killer, and just talk you through why I think they're overrated. Gotta be clear, first of all, just because I'm saying they're overrated doesn't mean I think they're bad perks. That's not the case, because I know the comment section will probably go ballistic if I say anything against perks people like. I still think they're good perks. I just think that they're either rated on tier lists far too high, or just they're used far too often, or people just kind of perceive that they're better than they are. That's kind of what I'm going for. They are all good perks. I would say all six that I'm going to go through today are all good perks. I just think they might have a little bit too much hype, getting a little bit too big for their britches, if you ask me. So we'll kick off first. We'll go with the Survivor overrated perks first, and then we'll go on to Killer. Survivor overrated perks. So on the screen just now, you'll see the three perks I'm going to discuss. So we've got Iron Will, we've got Soul Guard, and we've got Sprint Burst. So the reason why I've picked these ones, so basically the reason how I've picked these is I looked through the threads, as I said, on the forums. I looked at maybe 4 or 5 different people's tier lists for perks, and these are perks that always average in the S or A tier. And also, I've not done a kind of sample size of games, but I would go out on a limb to say particularly Iron Will and Sprint Burst would be run by the majority of people you would come up against, and I just think maybe a little bit too hyped. So I'll go through them one by one. So let's start with Iron Will. So basically, when injured, grunts of pain are reduced by 100%. Excellent perk. Phenomenal perk. But when you think about what you're doing as Survivor, it can come in handy in situations when you're trying to evade a killer or stealth, or if you're trying to hide nearby a killer, if you want to get like a flashlight save or stuff like that. I get that it's an incredibly useful perk, and especially against like spirits and things like that. It's a prime counter. But like if you're running it every single game, then you're just... I just feel it becomes a reliance. You know what I mean? Like, so if you then play a game where you don't run Iron Will, you'll put yourself in positions like too close to the killer where they'll be able to hear you, because you're so reliant on the fact that you can get away with more with Iron Will. I think it becomes a bit of a crutch perk for a lot of people. And as I said, it does have its use. It does have its place in builds, and certainly in solo queue it really helps out. I just think people become far too dependent on it, and I think for the actual benefit you get out of it, it's probably just got a little bit too much hype for what it does, really. I used to run when I was learning Survivor. I used to run Iron Will all the time, and then obviously as you develop and get better at the game, you realise that you want to kind of be more. You want to kind of maximise out your boldness, you want to get better at chase, you want to get better at looping, and you're not going to develop that if you become reliant on Iron Will and hiding and stealthing, if that makes sense. So that's just my 2 cents on that one. Again, it is a good perk, I just think that it's a little bit... people hold a little bit too much stock on it. So the next one we'll talk about is Soul Guard. Bit of a lengthier explanation on this one. So after being healed, or having recovered from the dying state, Soul Guard gives you the endurance status effect for 8 seconds, so any damage that would put you back into a dying state would trigger a deep wound effect. Status effect, which after you have 20 seconds to mend yourself, as is standard, taking any damage while under the effect of deep wound will put you in a dying state. This is only available if you are cursed. So if there's a hex totem live and active in the map, then you have this, but if there's no hex totems, then it's an empty perk slot because you don't get anything from it. So again, can see the benefit of it. Like if you've been slugged and you're able to get yourself up through Unbreakable, or someone picks you up, you get like a second chance, kind of like a borrowed time off the ground, which is great. But you're killer dependent in so many ways here, and the reason why so you're dependent that they bring a hex totem, you're dependent that they slug, you're dependent that they're nearby after you've been picked up. you're also then Survivor reliant on the fact that you need to then rely on your teammates to not do the hex totems to be able to let you have this perk. I just think for this is one that was consistently put like high A tier in all the tier lists I looked at, and I'm like, yeah, it's good for pairing with stuff like Unbreakable or whatever, but surely the amount of time you would actually ever get to use it is so limited and so specific that it's just taking up a perk slot that you could be using for like an adrenaline or a kind of vision based perk like a bond or a kindred or something, or something that will help you in the trial to get your objectives done. You know what I mean? You're going to be pairing this with something, and you're also then dependent. The kind of killer you come against is like a slugger. Like, it's not just a down someone, put them straight on hook, which I said I didn't do sample size for how many times it's ran, but I did look through my past one of my past stream VODs, and in 18 games across the piece, there would only been one game where I would have been able to get any benefit out of Soul Guard. So yeah, I mean, like, that's a pretty terrible return for something that's qualified as an A tier perk. I think it's good, and I think giving you basically being borrowed time from off the ground is an incredible perk. I just think that it's been over engineered too much. I think that the reliance on the hex perks is bad. I think that that's the main bad. Is like if you come up against a killer who's not running any hexes, it's an empty perk slot. If you're running with a team who are super efficient and do all the hex totems, if they come across Ruin, for example, at the start of the game, you're having an empty perk slot. I just think there's too much reliance on other factors of the matchup with your control for it to be a genuinely good perk. And the final one we'll go through is, this was the one that I think, between the Iron Will and this one, I think is probably the one that's going to get people most annoyed. Sprint Burst. So you get 150% running speed for 3 seconds, and it causes the exhausted status effect. The exhaustion lasts for 40 seconds at tier 3. So I just start off by saying I think all exhaustion perks are good. I think they're all second chance perks. They all help you out in the trial. I just don't like Sprint Burst. I just don't. I just think. So look, I'll break this down into 2 ways. So I think when you're playing and you're running Sprint Burst, you use it at times where you really don't need to use it, because every time you trigger a sprint, it just activates if it's available. So you use it at times you don't need to use it. The amount of times I've seen people get hit when they're trying to 99 a Sprint Burst and get the timing wrong, so you're putting yourself in danger of being like a bit too cocky. And then from a teammate side of things, there's nothing more frustrating when you're sitting on a gen working on it solo and you can see someone slowly like bigfooting their way over to your gen because they don't want to use their Sprint Burst. You know what I mean? So you're sitting there done maybe 25% of a gen, and they've just slowly crept over to the gen to make sure that they preserve their Sprint Burst. And you're just thinking, well, if you just ran over straight away, you'd have been here quicker and we'd be far more through this generator than we are just now. I just think it's a good idea to give people that instant burst, but I think it would be better if you could control when you use it. I don't know if that would make it too OP or that would make it too ridiculous. But sort of like the same way you get dead hard, like you can trigger your dead hard when you're injured to use it when you need it. Whereas Sprint Burst, I think, is just... I would just rather run virtually any other exhaustion perk. I would rather have dead hard or lithe or probably even balanced landing rather than have Sprint Burst. I just think it triggers too easy. The amount of actual benefit you get from it for the 3 seconds is pretty poor, if I'm being honest. But again, constantly putting the S in the A tier of people's tier lists, I don't get it myself. But it is a good perk. Not for me. I think just not for me. Okay, so now that the Survivor portion's over and probably everyone's clicked off because they are already mad at me, we'll move on to the killer one. So on the screen here, you'll see the 3 killer perks I'm going to go for. It's Hex, Noed, Thanatophobia, and Tinkerer. So they're 3 again that always seem to appear in S or A tiers of tier lists consistently. And I just want to chat through why I think they're a little bit overrated. So we'll start off with Noed, everyone's favourite perk. So basically, once the exit gates are powered or the end game's triggered, basically the adult totem becomes lit. Your movement speed is increased by up to 4%. Survivors suffer permanently from the exposed status effect. and you get this basically until someone cleanses the totem, right? So I'm not going to go on a rant here, say don't run NOED, don't do this, blah blah blah, it's a crutch perk, yada yada, blah 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 blah. And I'm also not going to just say survivors just do bones. I just don't see the... I just don't like it. I think it rewards sloppy play. It's like a safety net at the end of the game to get you extra kills that you've probably not earned. And if you're going into, unless you're doing like an end game build, right? I can understand if you're doing an end game build with like this, No Way Out, Rancor, Remember Me, or whatever, you know, you're doing some sort of end game build and it's for memes. I understand that, but like people who slap on serious build and then put NOED on, like, surely your aim is that you don't want to get to that stage of the game. Surely you don't want to get to the end game. So why would you take up a perk slot of something that can help you be productive in trial to make sure you don't reach the end game? But then you've got that there to go, oh well, in case I don't do very well, I've just got this that will give me a one-shot down on everyone and I can clean up. So from a killer's point of view, I don't really understand why people would choose it. Like, I don't get it. Like, I understand maybe at low ranks if you're learning and you're getting new to the game, but the amount of red rank and purple rank killers you see running NOED these days is I just don't understand it. Like, surely, as I said, you would want to be more productive in the trial and get to the point where you don't need to get to the exit gate stage or the end game stage to rely on a perk that gives you a one-shot down. Which is kind of my initial view on it. And then secondary, if you're playing against red rank survivors, right, they've got a decent game sense, they've got a decent knowledge of the map, they've got a decent knowledge of where totems spawn. So as soon as they see that first person go down with NOED, you're going to hook someone. 90% of people who use NOED will put someone on the hook and stay around the hook to try and get one-shot downs on those that come protect. Good survivors will just go and find your totem. The amount of times you see games in NOED and like after the first survivor's hit with it, NOED gets broke within like 10 seconds and then you've not got it anymore. It seems I get hexes are high risk, high reward, but I just don't think the reward for this one is worth the risk. I would much rather have a perk that would help me during the trial, like a ruin or a corrupt intervention, or you know, something like that that's going to help me not get to the end game or make sure the game doesn't reach the end game. And then I don't need to rely on NOED, and I just don't think it's a very good perk if you're going to try and consistently be good at a killer. If you're constantly relying on getting to the end game, it's a good perk. It does a really good thing. It has a really good kind of payoff at the end of it. I don't understand why people rate it so highly, and I don't understand why people run it as much as basically that one. So the next one is one that I'll probably get a lot of crap for in the comments as well. Is Thanatophobia. So basically, for each injured, dying, or hooked survivor, you get a 5% stackable penalty on repairing, sabotaging, and cleansing actions up to 20%. I think this is, first of all, it's always in the NS tier, and I think that if people could use it well, I think it would be in that tier. But the way that the game currently is, and the way that the game is currently played, people don't spread enough damage to get any value out of Thanatophobia. Like, especially with like the whole W meta, killers now don't go and try and, like, the amount of hit and run wraiths and hit and run style killers who want to inflict multiple injured states and then kind of go for downs is virtually non-existent, because people will just hold W for a long period of time to the period of anyone else who's in the map injured who isn't their objective will just heal themselves or get healed by someone else. So people will automatically heal as soon as they know Thanatophobia is on the map as well. It's one of the ones, cause it triggers and tells you you've got it. People will go out their way to heal where they probably wouldn't have otherwise. It's very rarely, I think, unless you're coming up like a really, really top tier or really, really good red rank killer, people get consistent value out of Thanatophobia. And I think that the actual perk itself and what it does is an excellent perk. I just don't think in live, in game, it translates to decent results. And that's the reason why I think it's overrated. I think it is an excellent perk. I just think in game, it's just not. Like, people will heal themselves, will go out their way to heal themselves so they don't have to deal with the penalties. As I said, people mostly will just hold W these days, so the chases are far more prolonged, so other injured survivors will make sure that they're healed up. So you're only potentially ever running at like a 5% penalty. You know what I mean? So you don't really, and taking up a perk slot for that to give you a 5% penalty on repair and stuff, that isn't really that much of a great benefit. And the final one I'm going to talk about is Tinkerer. don't know where the Tinkerer resurgences came from, but it seems to feel like now like every second killer you go up against is running Tinkerer. So basically, when a generator is repaired to 70%, it triggers a loud noise notification to the killer, and they are granted the undetectable status effect for 16 seconds. So this is another one kind of like Thanatophobia. Like on paper, what it does is excellent. So a gen's almost popped, you can then be undetectable, sneak up to that gen, or sneak up to another person where you know where they are, catch them off guard, and either get a grab or a down or whatever you're looking for. But in reality, as soon as the survivor team you're playing against realise you have Tinkerer, they're far more vigilant when they notice that so basically 70% hits on a gen when the fourth piston starts moving on the gen. If you know that the killer has Tinkerer, as soon as that fourth piston starts moving, you're hyper vigilant and looking as soon as you know that they have it. You know what I mean? People know to look out for it. People then, you maybe get one bit of value out of it, and yeah, it could come in handy for some surprises throughout the game. But on the whole, it's not, and especially if you're the other end of the map and a Tinkerer goes off, 16 seconds isn't a lot of time to get over to people. By the time you get towards their vicinity, your terror radius is usually back. It's good to get paired with stuff like regression perks like Pop or Ruin and things like that, so like you can constantly keep getting Tinkerer value when it dips below 70%. But on the whole, there's far better tracking perks out there than Tinkerer. And as I said, once you get the kind of first notification that someone is running Tinkerer, the team become hyper vigilant, and it becomes very, very difficult to get any sort of value out of it, which kind of, I think, would not make it an S or an A tier perk in live and in real. I think on what it does in its power, I think it probably is, but I think in game you don't get that amount of return out of it. Okay, discussion in the books done, dusted, moving on. I look forward to seeing everyone calling me every name under the sun for saying that some of their favourite perks that aren't the best. Again, just want to clarify, I like all 6 of these perks. I have used all 6 of these perks in my time in Dead by Daylight, and wouldn't hesitate putting any of them in a build. I just think that they get a little bit too much usage, or get kind of hyped up by people a little bit too much, to really be qualified as that S or A tier perk. So yeah, I'll be back next week with the underrated perk series. So if you've liked this one, or you disagree with me and you want to see what I class as underrated perks, that'll be coming out next week as another discussion video. As always, please like the video, please subscribe to the channel, please come view me over on Twitch at twitch.tv/LuboATM, where I stream Dead by Daylight. Love to talk to each and every one of you, and until I see you guys next time, peace.